Senator Smith.
Thank you.
And welcome to the Economics Committee, Senator Smith.
Pleasure to be here.
And Minister, lovely to have you here as well.
My great pleasure
Thank
to
you.
be here, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is my first opportunity to ask questions of the Commonwealth Grants Commission in the 2.5 going on 3 years that I've been a Senator. But given the extensive public commentary around GST issues generally, but more particularly around GST distribution issues in Western Australia, I thought this might be a timely opportunity just to come and explore a couple of points with you. But if I could just start, you did mention in your evidence that the Treasurer, Mr Hockey, had written to you on the 23rd of December asking for advice in regards to a number of issues, issues I think that form the basis of Western Australia's concerns about distribution. And in that letter, he asks for the advice on this matter to be received by him by the 28th of February. Can you advise, has that advice been provided to him yet?
No.
Do you expect the advice to be provided to him by the 28th of February?
I do.
What's the process for his consideration of that?
I have no idea. Sorry, you'd have to ask the Treasury that question.
Is it necessary for him to come back to the Commonwealth Grants Commission having reviewed any of that advice?
I don't believe so.
Right. Does the advice contain recommendations or just information?
I think I would prefer to wait until the Commission has actually finalised its position. It's one of the questions it itself is looking at, and it will be finalising that in the next couple of days.
Great. So it could contain recommendations, it could contain information advice, but what it contains is not yet resolved.
I think the Commission will be responding fully to the request of the Treasurer, but I don't want to go beyond that.
I respect that, thank you. I just want to turn briefly then to the National Commission of Audit recommendations. The National Commission of Audit looked at the issue of GST distribution reform and proposed moving to an allocation based on population share. Have you been asked to formally consider that recommendation?
No.
You're obviously aware of the recommendation, but you've not been asked to do any specific work around the recommendation. If I could just, in your earlier evidence, you mentioned that you had consulted with states around the letter of the 23rd of December.
Correct.
Could you share with us what are some of the, because I'm conscious, very aware of the West Australian position, less aware of some of the issues that other states might have. Are you able to share with us what some of the themes are attached to respective states?
I would prefer not to talk about the views of different states, because different states are at different positions of clearing their submissions for public release. Our intent is that they would all become public documents, which is a normal practice of the Commonwealth Grants Commission, that they would go up on our website. But we don't do that until all the states have cleared their submissions to us. In terms of general themes, there are concerns in relation to the amount of time that they've had to consider the position, concern about a change in the treatment in one particular form of revenue, large and volatile revenues, treating them differently from others, and in terms of changing the treatment at this point in time.
At this point in time, meaning?
Well, we have an established 3-year moving average. To switch from a 3-year moving average to a different assessment method, of course, has implications for GST distributions for different states, and they're worried that switching now has unfortunate consequences for their own GST shares.
The GST distribution arrangements have been described as, complex. Would you agree with that description of them? Oh, why?
I don't believe they're complex.
Perhaps you could just expand on that point a bit. No, this is. I'm genuinely interested.
I believe they're quite simple and straightforward if people take a modicum of interest in trying to understand how it works.
And how would you explain it to a layman or woman in Western Australia?
With a great degree of difficulty.
But
It is a
not a
system.
complex system, but it is difficult to communicate it to people.
It is a system which seeks to recognise that different states have different abilities to raise revenue and incur different expenses in providing the average suite of services to their residents, and the GST distribution compensates for the net impact of that on state budgets.
Okay, if we think about other federal jurisdictions across the world, and the way that they might allocate centrally sourced revenues, would you rate Australia's as internationally efficient? I'm keen to understand
inefficient in doing what?
Well, I'm keen to understand that clearly there's a debate at the moment about whether or not the Commonwealth distribution mechanism is meeting, the changing circumstance of Australian states and territories. Some people might, on examination of that, think that the current system may not be perfect, but it is the best. Others might like to think that there is the prospect of reform as the nation changes, as demands on states and territories change, as the nature of the relationship between the Commonwealth and states starts to change, with greater clarity around particular lines of responsibility. Is there anything in the international experience that we might be able to look to?
Not that I can suggest at this point in time.
Right. Are you ever asked to look at other international models or experiences?
No.
Right. Doesn't mean you can't?
It does not mean we can't, but we have not been asked to.
Could I just... the West Australian position has been one that has attracted a lot of attention, and I just wanted to share, some of those sort of headline concerns. In your previous comment, you did make the reference to the fact that shorter averaging periods might actually lead to increased volatility for some states. But when Western Australia says that one of the concerns with the current GST distribution model is that it reduces the incentives for states to develop and improve their economies. Is that a fair statement or fair concern?
I think different people have different positions on whether it does or does not. So I don't know whether there's a universal view on that. Different commentators have adopted different positions.
And of course, just because people have different opinions doesn't mean that each opinion is, a correct or worthy one.
Correct.
So acknowledging that people will have a different perspective, does, in your professional opinion, the GST distribution model at the moment act to reduce the incentive for states to develop and improve their economies?
I don't believe that anyone has been able to identify any evidence in the multiple inquiries which have proceeded in the last couple of years into the question of whether HFE is desirable or not that would lead you to conclude that.
Right. The second point that is often made in Western Australia is that there is that the current distribution arrangements, do distort the abilities for states to properly manage their budgets. So in the West Australian circumstance, for example, it's often talked that we'll go from 37 cents in the dollar, projected out to 11 cents. Is it fair to say that was prior to the volatility that we've witnessed in iron ore prices or commodity prices recently? But how do you respond to that particular point?
Well, I'm struggling to understand what the actual point is. Could you just repeat the question?
Well, it goes to the issue of the 3-year time lag in the fiscal equalisation. The argument is that if states, if the 3-year averaging was reduced to an annual averaging, that would improve the state's ability to manage its finances, because it would be more aware of what more aware of what sort of level of GST distribution it might be getting. But in your earlier evidence, you mentioned that the shorter averaging period actually might increase volatility.
I think that is the view of most state treasuries, that a shorter period would increase volatility.
Right, most meaning that Western Australia might be on its own?
I think that was the view they expressed to us in 2010, that it would increase volatility.
One more? Yeah. The GST distribution review submission that was presented by New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland and Western Australia, the joint submission of August 2012. What's the status of that? How has that submission been incorporated into, previous work? And what's the current position of that joint view?
Sorry, that was an inquiry that wasn't undertaken by the CGC, and so that submission has got nothing to do with us.
Right. Okay. Just explain that point to me a bit more. So
I
you're
think
obviously aware of the submission.
Yes, I've seen the submission,
Yep.
but it was a submission made to another inquiry, so it's been dealt with by that particular inquiry, not by the Commonwealth Grants Commission.
Okay. No, I wasn't quite aware of that. Finally, then, just one moment. Finally, then, just returning briefly to the National Commission of Audit recommendation. To be clear, you're aware of it, but you've not been asked to do any work around it?
Correct.
Great, excellent. Thanks very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you.